Let me welcome you all to this briefing on test and lab management using Visual Studio 2010. Before we proceed any further, kindly allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tejasvi Kumar. I work as a developer technology specialist at Microsoft. I focus on Visual Studio and related technologies. That's my email list that you see on the screen, tejkumar@microsoft.com. So if you have any questions after this briefing, feel free to reach out to me. I would be more than happy to respond to your queries. Today I'm going to be focusing on a new technology, a brand new technology that we've introduced as part of 2010 release. So if you look at the Stadium slide, it gives you the entire view of the Visual Studio product family. On the right hand side there, in the middle, you actually see something called Test Professional. So Test Professional is what I'm going to be focusing on. Then you also see something right at the bottom here, which is called Lab Management. So I'm going to be focusing on Lab Management. I'm going to show you Team Foundation Server, bits and pieces pertaining to test and lab. And then you have test professional here. I'm also going to show you certain capabilities which are available in Visual Studio, the premium and the ultimate editions, specifically which is called coded UI testing. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. With that, let me give you a little context here in terms of why we've done what we've done. So tester segmentation. So you have like different segments here. Okay. So let's look at the tester segmentation. So what we've done is, we did a bunch of surveys, and based on the results, we've kind of focused on some specific areas. So this is the overall, the test segment that we have. On the left-hand side, you see the generalist testers. On the right-hand side, you actually get to see the specialist testers. Now, think of the generalist tester as a person who does not have coding knowledge or scripting knowledge. So this person would probably just have an Excel sheet next to this, on the screen, bunch of test steps. So he or she would open the application, then execute, each of those test steps or the test case, on that particular application. Would probably say, the test case has passed or the test case has failed and stuff like that. So that's a typical manual testing process. And today, unfortunately, the tools that we have in the industry, right, all these tools focus on the other segment, which is the specialist tester segment. And the tools that we have in the industry today, unfortunately, are not really targeting the manual testing segment or the generalist testers. So based on all the surveys that we did, right, we kind of, figured that we need to focus on that particular segment, which is the manual tester. So we've actually introduced a bunch of capabilities specifically for manual testers, because 70% of the testing that takes place today is all manual testing. Given my job, I speak to a lot of people, I interact with a lot of people, and this is the feedback I've actually got. Around about 70%, it varies plus or minus, is all manual testing. They don't use any automation tools. They don't have any other technologies being used. It's mostly like Excel sheets, test steps, and then you have the application, which is under test. And on the right hand side, you have a bunch of different tools targeting this particular segment. Now this segment is focusing on people who have knowledge on coding, on scripts and stuff like that, right? So that's a different segment. So we've kind of focused on both of these segments, but most of the testers reside on the generalist tester segment. So that's the backdrop, and that's the segment that we're really focusing on. I want to give a little context in terms of some of the key benefits of this platform. So I want to give that context and then probably give you a walkthrough of the capabilities of this technology. The first thing that we've really focused on is this whole developer and tester collaboration. If you are a developer, or if you are a tester, or if you are in the software development industry, you will be able to relate to what I'm talking about. So imagine you have a tester on one side, right? So this person goes and executes the test cases. And if a test case fails, the bug is filed by the tester, sent back to the developer. And when the developer receives that bug, what's the first reaction? Developer is that real haughty guy, right? I mean, he's the person who's supposed to be the intellectual person in that whole population. So this person's immediate reaction is, it works on my machine. How dare this tester file a bug? And he's just not accepting the fact that there could be a bug in that particular application, because every person, we're all humans end of the day, so that person is so confident that whatever application he or she has written works, because they've done some ad hoc testing on that particular machine. So they're in the denial mode. So that's the first reaction. So we have this classic problem that we call as the developer saying, I cannot reproduce the problem, and that person sends it back to the tester. So this situation is very well articulated in this whole graphic. You all probably play table tennis, right? Ping pong. So you have a developer on one side and the tester on the other side. The tester actually files a bug, and what happens? The developer is in complete denial stage. He's like, I cannot reproduce the problem. So that person actually smashes it back to the tester, and this ping pong happens. Few of these actions take place. So the developer on one side is like, sending it back. The tester is like, frustrated. He's like, what is this guy up to? It's like, I can see this bug here and stuff like that, right? So this is a classic problem we have in the industry today, and that's one area that we've really focused on. I'm actually going to show you how this whole developer and tester, the collaboration, the bunch of information that you can actually package as part of this bug and send it back to the developer, which means the developer gets to see where that problem is occurring. He or she gets all the details pertaining to how that error actually took place. So that's the first focus area. The second focus area is like, from a generalist tester perspective, we have a bunch of manual testing happening today. So can we in any way help these manual testers become a little more productive? That's the point. And we've just focused on that particular point, and we've introduced a bunch of capabilities specifically for the manual testers, and these folks can become a lot more productive. So whatever test cases or whatever actions they go and execute on that particular action, we can actually go and convert those actions and make them into a coded UI test or a backend script, which means end of the day you have a bunch of manual test activities getting converted into coded UI scripts, which means you can actually go and execute those test cases automatically as part of a build process. You're in a way going and automating each of those actions. So that's what we've actually focused on from a manual testing or a generalist tester's perspective. Finally, we focused on the third important area, which is lab management. So lab management specifically, dwells into this whole problem statement where you are a test engineer and you're supposed to create these 3 or 4 test beds to execute your test cases. Let's take a simplistic scenario. You have a web-based application. You need to make sure that your application functions very well on IE6, IE7, and probably Firefox, whatever versions and stuff like that, right? Different browsers. It has to work properly on IIS6, IIS7 and stuff like that. So this is a classic, situation. Now, as a test engineer, you're probably given one machine, and hardware, right? Hardware is like a real expensive thing, especially for folks, residing in India. So given this kind of a background, you are, constrained, number one, by one single hardware, and you're going to lock that hardware in a closed room, and you're going to enter that room and then execute your test cases. And if there's a point of failure, you're probably from a regression perspective, you have to go and recreate those environment or roll back to the previous state. Again, it takes too much of time, especially the configurations, the deployment on that particular box, right? It takes a lot of time. That's number one. So we are kind of helping you with that matter. The second thing is the different environments that you want to create. Very easily through virtualization, we go and help the testers go and create these different environments. That's number 2. Number 3, whatever data that you want to package as part of the bug that is getting filed, right, to the developer, you have a bunch of data collectors. I can actually go and enable all of these data collectors and then file all of these log files as part of the bug that I'm actually sending back to the developer. So that's the third thing. And finally, you can actually take a snapshot of the environment as well and send it back to the developer. So there's a bunch of interesting things that you can actually do through lab management. Heart of heart, it's a very simple concept. So as a test engineer, this person uses virtualization in the back end. We provide a nice little interface for this person. So this person can actually go and create these different templates, environments that he or she would require for the testing purpose, right? That's number one. Once the templates are created, they can check out a particular template. Imagine you have a library and library of templates. You can actually go and check out a particular template that you would require for your testing purpose, and then you can go and actually deploy your apps on that particular environment. It could be multiple environments. So all of these things are very easily done. Clicks of a few buttons. You don't have to really go and waste too much of time. If you want to recreate those environments, or if you want to replicate another environment with the same configurations, very easy. Just go check out the environment, execute your, use MS deploy probably to go and deploy those files on that particular environment and stuff like that. So the virtualization technology is really useful here. So we leverage the virtualization technology from Microsoft. In the back end, you have System Center Virtual Machine Manager, helping us out. So we've kind of integrated the software development lifecycle with the virtualization, aspects. All of these are basically integrated, and that's what lab management basically helps you with. So I'm going to basically show some of these capabilities through a quick demonstration at a later stage. So these are the three key focus areas that we have, and most importantly, whatever I'm showing you, right, all of this technology was built in India. So all of this was developed in the Microsoft, the India Development Center at Hyderabad. So it's very close to our heart. We're really, really passionate about this technology. And obviously, like, once I show you the demonstration, it's going to really blow your mind. So with that, let me also give you a complete picture of like what we had in the past and what we're actually introducing in this release of 2010. So you actually get to see those green sections there. The green sections are the ones which we actually add in the previous versions of Visual Studio. So we add a bunch of capabilities specifically around early phase testing, the developer level testing. So we had a bunch of capabilities that we actually introduced. All of that is there. Unit testing capability was available. We also add capabilities specifically around load testing. So you could actually go and generate virtual user load on an application. So you could actually go and record those scenarios at the HTTP, HTTPS protocol layer, and then go and simulate load on that application. So these capabilities we already add. From a bug tracking, issue tracking, requirements management perspective, you had all of these capabilities previously available in the Team Foundation server. So whatever you see in the green sections there, those are new capabilities that we've actually introduced. So specifically, you have capabilities which are called coded UI testing, and you have the Microsoft, the test runner, the fast forward capabilities, test case management, the lab management, bunch of data collectors in the back end, reporting. So I'm going to show all of these capabilities through a demonstration in just a little bit. So with that, I'm going to toggle into a virtual machine now. So I've just opened up my Visual Studio environment here. You can actually see the Visual Studio. I'm on a virtual machine which has Visual Studio installed, which has the Microsoft Test Professional, which has the Team Foundation server in the back end, and a bunch of other services that I require as part of my whole environment. This is a brand new interface that we've actually introduced. It's a new tool, new technology altogether. This is called as Microsoft Test Professional. And you actually get to see here that you have two tabs here. So you have the testing center, and then you have the lab center. Testing center basically helps you with regards to test case management, planning of your testing activities, execution of your test cases, tracking of requirements, bugs, so on and so forth. You can actually organize your test cases. Lab management, the lab center specifically, helps you with regards to management of your back-end lab infrastructure. So if you have a bunch of different environments that you've actually created, right, this would be the interface that you would need to use to go and manage those lab infrastructure. So on my laptop, I do not have the lab management setup. So I will actually show you some of these demonstrations through probably a video at a later stage. So let me walk you through a very quick scenario now. I've got on the left-hand side this option called, creating a new suite. So I can actually go and create a new suite, and I can actually have all of my user stories, in a particular suite, and then I can basically have a bunch of different test cases on the right-hand side and stuff like that. So I already have a suite which is called Iteration 2. I can go and add requirements. So, you could have requirements or user stories, right? So I have a bunch of these requirements here. I could actually go and add these requirements into my plan. So I already have those, but I'm not going to add anything at this point in time. And then on the left-hand side, for each of those requirements or user stories, on the right-hand side, you get to see the corresponding test cases. So that's the way it basically works. You can go into a specific requirement. You could also look at properties. So if you go into properties, right, I spoke about data collectors. So there's a bunch of data collectors that we actually make available as part of this whole the Microsoft Test Professional product. So you could go into the details here, and at the bottom you get to see the test settings. So I'm going to just open the test settings, and you actually get to see the different options that we have. You could actually go and enable whatever options you would want. So you have the general settings here, the roles. I'm on a laptop, so I just have one single machine running here. And on the right-hand side here, you get to see the different options available. You can go and enable any of these options. So I can actually go and enable this option called Event Log. IntelliTrace, I spoke about IntelliTrace in a previous module. Now I'm going to enable IntelliTrace for my test run as well. I'm going to go and save my settings. And then you have the system information, the network emulation, and the test impact analysis. We spoke about that in the previous module. You have the video recorders, which means whatever the tester does, right, I can actually go and capture all of those details through a video, which I can actually share to my developers as well. So once I'm done with these settings, configurations, I can actually click on finish. You have the test environment. If you have lab set up in the backend, right, I could actually go and manage those lab environments here as well. So I don't have the lab set up here installed on my laptop, so I won't actually go through the details there. You actually, at the bottom here, you get to see the builds in use. At this point in time, I have this build number, which is called iBuySpy underscore whatever dot 2. So that's the build number I'm actually using for this particular test execution. You could actually go and modify, change the build. If you have a latest build available, you can actually go and make that as part of your test plan as well. Right at the bottom, you have the test results. You get to see the number of test cases which have passed, failures by type, test analysis, and stuff like that, right? So let me very quickly go and close this out. And I'm going to get into this tab called test now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how this test case can be executed in Microsoft Test Professional. So I'm going to just walk you through a very quick demonstration of some of these capabilities. So I'm going to take this test case which I've created a little while back. It's called add item to shopping cart and checkout. So I'm going to go and click on run. So what's going to happen now is on the left hand side you actually get to see the Microsoft Test Runner. And on the right hand side, you have this application which is under test. And let me just go and minimize my Visual Studio. I'm going to launch my Internet Explorer. So what I can do is I can actually go and enable this option called create action recording. I can then go and start executing my test case. So I didn't really show you how a test case looks like, but it's fairly straightforward. On the left-hand side, you actually get to see each of the test steps in that particular test case. So what it's basically doing is it's initializing my environment. So on the left-hand side, you have a bunch of these different test steps, right? On the right-hand side is my application under test. So the first step states that go and open iBuySpy web application, and you have the URL here as well. So I can actually go and open that particular application. So I'm on a virtual machine, so it's going to take a little while. It's going to be a little slow, but just bear with me. I've just gone and entered the URL. So the first step, right, it says open iBuySpy web application, and I've got the URL here. So I've just gone and entered the URL. While it connects into my application, I could actually go and specify whether my test case has passed or failed. So that's typically what a manual tester would do. You would typically have some of these test steps on an Excel sheet, and you would actually go and say whether it has passed or failed. That's typically what a manual tester would do. Now the second step says click on sign in. So I could go and click on sign in. Very, very straightforward, typical manual testing work. And whatever I'm actually doing, right, in the back end, all these actions are actually getting recorded. So the second step passes as well. I could go and say, okie dokie, you passed. The third step, it says click on register. Again, I could go and specify that this particular test step has passed. So the fourth step, right, is fairly interesting. So this is where you could actually go and parameterize your all testing activities. So on the left-hand side, you have, imagine you have a backend, a table there, and you have these different columns there. And so if you want to bind a particular control to a particular column in the back end, especially from, if you have multiple rows of data in that particular table, you can actually go and, re-execute all of these test steps for each of those values. So that's what I'm actually trying to do now. So I'm data driving my test cases. So you have the full name. So what I could do is I could go and click on my name, right, which says full name. I'm clicking on that particular value there. I go into that control. In this case, it's a text box. I click on that particular control. I just do a control V. As simple as that. What happens now is both of these are bound to each other. So that particular column, all the values, all the rows in that particular column is bound to this particular control. In this case, it's a text box. I do the same thing for the second value that I have here, which is the email address. I go and click on The second control, which is the text box, do a control V. The third one is the password. Similarly, I go and do a control V, password. The last one, last value is confirm password, right? So again, I'm binding this particular text box to the column in my table. So once I do this, I could again go and specify that, my test case is passed. So I could click on the next step, which says submit. So on the left-hand side, you have each of these test steps. You could actually go and specify whether it is passed or failed. On the right-hand side, you have the application which is getting tested by the tester. So you have the next step which says click on communications. So I go and click on communications. Again, being a decent citizen, right, I need to go and specify whether it is passed or failed. It's optional actually, but you could, as a best practice, go and specify whether it is passed or failed. The next step says click add to cart under fake mustache translator, whatever that means, I don't know. So I go and click on add to cart. So I could again go and specify that my test case is, my test step has passed. The next step says click final checkout. And as a tester, I go and click on final checkout. So whatever I see on the left hand side, I go and do the same action on the right hand side. And typical testing, manual testing. So again, I go here and specify that my test step has passed. The next step says click on submit. So let me go and click on submit. So have you passed? Yes, you passed. The last step, if you notice this small check mark here, it means whatever I did in my previous steps, right, I was not really validating the values, the return values, whatever I'm actually getting on display on my web page, right? I didn't really do any of those things. The last step, you have the small check mark. It just means that I need to validate for a specific value here in this particular test step. So the validation goes like this, right? It says confirm order was submitted, validate the order total is what it says in the brackets. And the expected value, right, is $59.99, 59.99. On the right hand side, the total that you actually get to see is $599.99. So obviously there's a mismatch, right? What does the tester do now? Tester goes and says the test case has failed. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go and say fail this test case. There's not done types. So I go and say wrong total. You can give some comments as well. I need to give some proof to the developer, right? The classic problem that I explained some time back. So the test case has failed, but the developer needs to see some proof. So what can I do? I can actually, you see the small screenshot? I can actually take a small capture of this particular screen. So let me go and click on that particular camera. On the right hand side, I can just go and highlight that particular section of the application. So it basically means that, okay, this was the value I got and this was the expected value. So that's proof number one. The second thing is if I had lab installed in the back end, right, the lab server, what I could do is one of the coolest things, folks, I could take a snapshot of that environment. That's an amazing thing. So I could actually take a snapshot of whatever my environment is. I have a Windows 2008 server running here. I have like IIS, running there. I have like a bunch of other services and stuff like that, right? I could take a snapshot of that and send across a link to this environment back to my developer. I don't have that installed here, but I'll show this capability through a quick video at a later stage. So what I can do now is I can actually go and raise a bug. That's typically what a tester would do, right? I didn't do anything additional over and above what a tester typically does. So what you actually get to see now, you have this bug which is popping up. You're raising a new bug, right? So I can actually go and enter the details. Wrong total. I'll keep it very simple. I can assign it to the person working on this particular problem. Let's assume Tejasvi Kumar is the developer. And if you notice here, there's a bunch of details automatically captured. I didn't really have to go and capture those details as a tester. So I'm just, raising a new bug, assign it to the person who's working on that particular problem, and then I'm gonna go and save and close this particular bug. So my job is pretty much done, right? I move on in life. As a tester, I had a test case. I executed that particular test case. You had a bunch of test steps as part of that particular test case. You had a point of failure. I took a screenshot and I just raised a bug. and then I move on in life. I probably start executing some other test case and stuff like that. So I'm going to go and end this iteration. So this particular iteration, right? I'm just going to go and end this iteration. So in the back end, if you notice, there's a bunch of data collection happening, right? So I can actually go and save my test case, save and close my test case, and I exit. As a tester, I've moved on. So what I'm going to show you now is, I'm going to show you from a developer's perspective, what does the developer get to see? So I've showed you, what the tester typically does. And I showed you how our technology helps the tester to actually go and, create those test cases and do the configurations and then basically go and execute the test case. So now what I'm going to show you is, I'm going to show you how, the developer gets to see this bug and how does the developer react and what's the kind of information that we actually package as part of the bug and sending back to the developer. So let's assume the tester has moved on in life. I have Visual Studio open here. I'm going to open Visual Studio. I'm actually working on this project called iBuySpy. So you are the developer. I get into work items and I look at active bugs. When I open active bugs, what I actually get to see now is the bug that was raised by the tester a little while back. So I have this bug here. Let me just open that particular bug. And what's the first thing that you see? You have every single step recorded and available to you in that particular bug work item. So here, if I scroll down a little bit, right? So you have the details tab here. You get to see each of the test steps. So if I scroll down a little on the right hand side here, you get to see each and every test step. So I could actually click on this link and it would take me to that particular test step itself. So I don't have to rerun each and every action there. I could go to the specific test step through this video. So that's the first thing. If I scroll down a little more, you also get to see this attachment here. When I double click on that, it actually opens up the screenshot. You get to see the error message I got. So the expected value and the actual value that you actually saw in this application, right? That's proof number 2. If you scroll down a little bit here further, you have the entire video recording as well. Just to show you how this works. You have the video recording. It opens Windows Media Player. It actually goes and replays whatever the tester did, right? Everything is getting replayed back now. And the developer gets to see whatever the tester did during the execution of the test case. So you're actually seeing the video now. So let me go and close this out. And folks, I'm going to show you one of the coolest capabilities. So the tester executed the test case, right? There was a problem found. You have this IntelliTrace log files, which is magically packaged as part of my bug work item, and that's reflecting here. What I could do now is, I could actually go and click on the IntelliTrace log files. When I click on the IntelliTrace log files, it will open my Visual Studio in a debug mode and just check out this information. I have all the information pertaining to the threads. So I have all the details on which thread was executed when and stuff like that, right? If I scroll down a little more here, you get to see the exception data as well. So you have the exception statements, and if you double click on the exception statement, it's going to basically open Visual Studio, go to that particular exception statement, go to that line of code literally, and it's going to tell me this is where that exception statement took place, which is amazing. So on one side, we have the tester who's executing the test case, right? It's all black box testing. That person has no clue whether this application was written in C#, VB.NET, or for that matter, even on .NET at all. And the other side, that person files a bug, and magically here, through the log files that were collected, the data collectors that we have packaged, right? This person gets to see the line of code, the exception statements, all of those details available at the fingertips. You can actually go and look at the ADO.NET calls. How cool is this? This is one of the most powerful capabilities, that I can really talk about. So the developer and the tester, you have this cool collaboration between these two teams. So with that, let me just do a Shift F5. So that's one unique capability that we provide through this whole technology. So let me go back into my Microsoft Test Professional. So as a developer, I got a chance to look at where that bug is probably occurring and stuff like that. So let me go put my testers at again. So as a tester, I have executed a test case, my test case has failed and stuff like that. So let's take another scenario. Let's assume that you have a new build which is available. Now I can actually go and click on track, the tab, and you have these assign build option here. Let me just go and click on that. So if you notice here, the build in use at this point in time, right, it says I by spy underscore whatever dot 2. But there's also a latest build available. Your developers have made available another build for you. So that's reflecting here at the bottoms, right? So I by spy underscore whatever dot 4, that's the latest build. Now what you can do is, I can go and assign this build into my plan. When I do that, what the tool tells me right now is, if you have like 10-15 test cases, and based on the changes that have occurred on your sources, it will basically tell me these are the impacted test cases, and you need to go and re-execute these impacted test cases because you've changed that particular build, right? So it basically tells me view the recommended test. So it's going to basically show me these two test cases which are impacted because I made that small change in whatever that new build that I've made available in my plan, test plan. So both these test cases previously passed. So what I can actually do is, I can go and reset both of these test cases to active again. So test case number 54 and 55. And you also get to see the related work items. So which were the impacted work items and stuff like that. So this is like very, very cool stuff. So you can actually then go back into your plan, or go to the test execution environment, and if you look at those two test cases, right, test case number 54 and 55, if you notice here, both have got reactivated. This is the power of test impact analysis, folks. So this is what typically a manual tester would do. So what I'm going to show you now is, I'm going to show you a capability which is really powerful. So as a manual tester, you had this person go and execute a bunch of test steps, right? And this person says whether it has passed or failed and stuff like that. But if you want to automate these actions or convert these actions into a backend code or script, right, it's fairly easy. And I'm going to show you how that works. So let me go into Visual Studio. So the way we've kind of segregated these two segments is, on one side we have the manual testers. So this person does not understand any scripts or code, the backend code. So this person goes and executes the test cases. All of that is manual work. And then you have this other person who's the specialist tester. So this person actually works in Visual Studio environment, by the way. So within Visual Studio, you have this option called test. Go and click on new test. So it gives me a bunch of different types of test cases, right? So I'm actually going to go and create this new test case, which is called Coded UI test. You choose the language which you're comfortable in. We have three options here: C#, VB, or C++. I'm going to take C#. That's the script, the backend script, which is going to be generated now. So I'm going to take the default name. I don't have any project right now, so it's going to prompt me to create a new test project. I'm going to take the default name, and then I'm going to go and say create a new test project for me. So what you'll notice now is, there are two options available here. The first option, it says you can go and record new scenarios. That's the first thing. So whatever I did in the Microsoft Test Professional, right, the manual testing work, I can actually go and create the same kind of scenarios using Visual Studio as well. The second option, it says use an existing action recording. So I can actually use an existing action recording that I probably created using the Microsoft Test Professional, right? I can actually convert that into a C# Coded UI test case. So I'm going to show you how that works. So I'm going to say OK. So this is the project I'm working on. I can actually go to a specific ID. Let me go into my Microsoft Test Professional. And what I'm going to do is, if you look at end-to-end test, right, I'm going to take this particular test case, which is called simple end-to-end checkout. So the number, the ID is 59. So I'm going to go back into my Visual Studio environment. And in Visual Studio, I'm going to go and specify that 59 is the test case that I want to basically convert into Coded UI test here. So I'm going to go and find that test case and say OK. So whatever action recordings that we had created, right, as a manual tester, all of that would magically get converted into a Coded UI test script here. So if you scroll down here a little bit, you'll notice that all of this was automatically generated for you at a very high level. By the way, if you go into the details here, you could actually go right click and say go to the definition. You'll have a bunch of code. All of this code was automatically generated for you folks. And what I'm going to do now is, I'm going to show you how this test case executes. So let me just go and comment out this last step which says close browser, and I'm going to go and run this particular test. My hands are free from the laptop, so you will notice that the browser window opens up. It's going through the different test steps. There are 2 iterations here, so you'll probably notice that the browser window opens up twice, and it'll go through all of the actions. So on one side, we had the manual tester who actually went and created or execute, created these test cases, ran through these test cases. In the back end, we recorded the actions. We've converted those actions into a coded UI test. That's what we've done, and I'm actually going and executing those test cases here. So you'll have the test results in just a little while. If you notice, the test case passed. The reason it passed is I was not really doing any validations. It was pure play re-execution of the test cases. You can actually go and do validations as well. So the way you can do that is fairly straightforward. You could go right click and say generate code for coded UI test. You have this tool or utility that we call as coded UI test builder. I can actually go and launch coded UI test builder. You see this at the bottom of my screen on the right hand side, you see this small window. So you have a record option here. You also have this crosshair. What I can do is I can take this crosshair and map it to a specific control. And if I want to go and validate whether I'm getting the right kind of data into that particular control, I can actually go and do all of those things here using this coded UI test builder. So I had 2 iterations in this particular test case, right? So I'm actually going to go and close the second one. For the first one, I'm going to basically take this crosshair, and I'm going to bind it to this particular control, the total value, which is $1499.95, and you actually get this the control, the UI control map. You can actually go and choose the specific control and add an assertion. So that's what I'm actually doing. So I'm actually adding an assertion against that particular control and value. So I can then go and close it. So this time I can actually go and say generate the code for me. So I'll take the default names, add and generate. So what's going to happen now is it's going to magically go and generate the backend code for me automatically, right? So let me just go and close this coded UI test builder, and this is the method that was added automatically. So as of now, I've added an assertion statement. I have 2 iterations here in this particular test case, right? And I've basically hard coded it to the first value. So which means this time when I go and execute my test case, it should actually fail. So I'll go and re-execute my test case this time. It'll go through the different, the scenarios. It'll open up the browser window once again. It's going to go through all of those test steps. It's going to open the browser window again. But this time there's some amount of validation happening, and this time what's going to happen is it's actually going to fail. So if you notice, my test case fails, and you'll obviously get the details here. It says basically the expected value is whatever and the actual value is whatever and stuff like that, right? So this is in terms of how you can basically convert your action recordings into a coded UI test case. The last thing I want to show you is you can actually go and record the scenarios from within Visual Studio. So I want to basically show how that works. So I'm going to go into the test menu option, go and create a new test. So this time I'm going to create a coded UI test, and I'm going to actually record some scenarios from within Visual Studio. So coded UI test, I'm going to choose C#, say OK, create a new project. So you have 2 options popping up here. The first option says, you can actually go and record actions, right? So let me go and open my application in a test. In this case, I'm going to show you how this works for Thick Client as well. So I'm going to open the calculator application. So I choose the first option, say OK. You get the coded UI test builder popping up here on the right hand side at the bottom of my screen. You have the red button here. I can actually just click on the red button, which means it starts recording my actions on the application which is under test. So when I put the focus on the calculator, you notice that there's a small recording window there. So I can actually go and interact with that particular calculator. Say 55 plus 5 is what, 60. So that's my action on the calculator. I can actually just go and close it. You have this option to go and generate the code. I'll take the default names for this. As simple as that. So within Visual Studio, you can actually go and create these kind of scenarios as well. It automatically goes and generates the backend code for me. I can close my Coded UI test builder. If you want to re-execute this test case, right, you could actually go and re-execute this test case as well. So there's my C# code. You can actually go right click and say run test. And what happens now is obviously I have the calculator. My calculator application is open, so it's going to go and rerun my actions on that particular application. So that's what's going to happen right now. So it very quickly rerun the different actions I did on that particular application. My test case passed. I didn't have any validations. So let me kind of get out of my Visual Studio environment. I showed you some scenarios. I'll go back into my presentation, and I showed you some demos on manual and Coded UI testing. The last thing I want to show you is a very quick demonstration on the lab management. I don't have lab installed on my laptop, but I'm going to use some videos. I'm going to show you a very short clipping on how lab management can be used in your scenarios. So I have a scenario here where you have Microsoft Test Professional, and I'm going to show you how we can go and take a snapshot of that environment, attach it as part of the bug, and send it back to the developer. So on the left hand side you have the Microsoft test runner, the right hand side you have the application which is under test, right? So as a manual tester, you're going through those different actions. On the left hand side you say whether it has passed or failed, and then the next step says click on sign in, log into the application. So I key in my credentials, I log into this application. When I log into this application, I should actually get a welcome so and so user, right? So I should actually get that. I don't see that reflecting here. So what I'm going to do as a tester is I'm going to go and fail this particular test step. As part of this failure, what I can also do is I can go and take a environment snapshot, which is what I'm actually doing now. I go and take a snapshot of the environment, and then I can raise a bug. So in the backend I have lab management, the lab setup already there. So it's going to take a snapshot of that environment. As part of the bug, I can actually attach this, the link to the snapshot. I can send it back to the developer. So that's what's going to happen now. So this is typically what a tester would do, right? Now from a developer's perspective, you actually can go and look at this particular bug within Visual Studio. We're going to just show you how that looks like. So the tester has actually gone, closed, created a new bug, closed that bug, and now the bug has gone to the developer. The developer is going to open this particular bug, looking at the repro steps. He goes to the details, and then you have the information pertaining to the snapshot there, environment snapshot. So this person actually goes and connects to that environment. I think this is one of the coolest capabilities, folks. You're actually going and connecting to that particular environment. So what happens now is it opens up the environment that the tester was using to execute the test case, right? So it kind of just magically opens up everything. And now as a developer, you can actually go and interact with the application the way the tester interacted with the application, actually get to see whatever the tester did on that particular application. So you are a developer, you've written the code, so you can actually go and straight away fix this particular problem. So that's a very quick demonstration of how the lab management works. So let me go back into my presentation very quickly. So with that, folks, this slide here gives you the details pertaining to the platform support, the different platforms that we're going to be supporting as part of the Microsoft test and lab management. So I won't really run through all these details. It's all available in the links here. So I've given you a bunch of references here. You have the link to download Visual Studio. You have the resources for the Microsoft test tools. There's a fantastic blog there. At the bottom again, the a bunch of blogs. So a bunch of information available for you. I would urge you all to go and look at this information. With that, I would like to thank you all for attending this briefing on test and lab management. using Visual Studio 2010. Have a great day. Thank you so much.